it doesn't quite feel like it because it is so humid right now. I tried to sit outside for a little bit today and it did not work. It was just way too sticky. But it's starting to change. We are in a season change, which is amazing. So, looking forward to having a nice conversation. Are we, everything working? Everything's working. So, I still don't have a video on my end, but you guys probably do on your end. If you guys are watching on Facebook, on one of the Facebook channels, just to let you know, I'm going to do a little bit of a teaching. I'm going to share for probably 20 to 30 minutes or so. And then we're going to do some dream interpretation towards the second half of this video. And if you would like to submit a dream to be interpreted, the best way to do that is going to be on our YouTube channel, because I'm going to be able to watch the comments on YouTube, and I'm not going to be able to see all the different comments that end up on the social media until after the video is done. So if you have a dream, that would be the best place. And when we do dreams, one of the things about YouTube and why it's so helpful for us to use the YouTube channel is it actually limits the amount of characters that you're able to put on as a comment. So it keeps the dreams shorter, which makes it a lot easier for this format. There's going to be times where we will do longer dreams, but for these lives, it's so much easier to do the shorter dreams. And so when you're putting that, think of it that way. You want to think of a shorter dream that you want interpreted, because if there's a dream that has multiple comments to be able to put the dream, it gets separated out on the list, and I'm not able to see all of that. And so I will focus on the ones that I am able to see as far as single comments for a dream. So let's see, we've got Woodlands, Texas. Stephanie, welcome, glad you're with us. As you guys are hopping on, please share where are you from, what's your what area, what part of the world, what part of the United States or other countries that you might be in as you're getting on. And we're going to have a fun conversation, something that I've been thinking about, and how things are going, especially in the United States, but literally around the world. We're in such an interesting time. We have Finland. Shalom to you as well, Carl. Welcome. The Panhandle of Texas. We got Pretoria, South Africa, Rhode Island, North Carolina. Guys, welcome. So glad that you're in. Baltimore. Wonderful. Good to see you, John. Welcome. So, get Donna just popped on, said hello. Glad you guys can join us. So, with everything that's going on, there's so much that is happening around the world. And there's so much confusion as to what's actually happening. We have clear misinformation. We have people, we have corporations that are hiding things that they don't want people to know about. You're supposed to be able to search and find good information, bad information. I mean, you can search on the internet, and you can find stuff on how to do satanic rituals, and you can find stuff on how to do all kinds of crazy stuff that people shouldn't be doing. But then you have some doctors that put out some information that doesn't fit with what people want, and it just disappears, and it's not available for people to find it. You have the CDC here in the U.S. that puts out a report that doesn't fit with what politicians want everybody to think, and that gets buried on the CDC website. It's very hard to find, if you can even find it. And we have so much that's going on. You've got people that are angry. You've got organizations and groups that are using terrorism to try to push an agenda. You have people that are using anger and loud noise to be able to suppress things that they don't like. You have bullying that's going on in the political arena. You've got bullying that's going on on social media. You've got bullying that's going on in places of business. If you are doing something that somebody likes, if you're not doing something that somebody likes. And what's going on is people are trying to control the world around them, but they're doing it through negative means. And we as believers have not been given that as an option. There are a couple different times in Scripture where it says this. Paul says this, and I believe Peter says this. Basically, you cannot defeat evil with evil. The only way to defeat evil with good. And that's basically how Paul says it in Romans, that we do not change things. We do not change things that we don't like by being negative. And I've talked a little bit in a different video about how leaders specifically should operate out of a different spirit to bring about change. But what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about how the fruit of the Spirit actually releases change into the environment that we're in. In Matthew chapter 13, there are a number of parables that Jesus shares that are explaining different aspects of the kingdom, how the kingdom works, different things that are going to be happening in the kingdom. And one of the parables that he uses is of this woman that takes leaven and she kneads it into 3 measures of dough, and the whole lump of dough becomes leavened. And this idea that God takes something small and he begins to bring it into an environment, and it begins to initiate change through the situation. Now, the enemy knows how God operates, and so he tries to do the same thing. Now, think a little bit about leaven. Those of you that have made bread, when you put yeast into your dough, if you just put yeast in your dough and you go put your dough in the refrigerator, will that dough rise? It's not going to rise sitting in the refrigerator. Once you have yeast in it, it actually requires warmth for it to work. So the leavening agent can be introduced, but it stays dormant until heat comes. And so both God and the enemy recognize this. They begin to release a leavening agent into a culture, into society. And then when pressure and heat comes, then that leavening agent begins to come to the surface. And what we're seeing going on in the world today with the anger, with the terrorism that is called political activism, and with the angry words, with the bullying that's happening online, with the suppression of truth, these things are not new things that are just being introduced into society. They have been there for a while, but they were dormant because there wasn't enough heat. Now, you add the heat and the pressure that comes from a lockdown, from a virus. You add the heat and the pressure that comes from situations that were unjust, that shouldn't have happened, and you actually force heat by focusing on a particular viewpoint, and all of a sudden the stuff that had been dormant for a while begins to come to the surface. Now, as believers, we have to be ones that operate out of a different spirit. We should not look like the world. Jesus says in John chapter 16 and 17 that he doesn't take us out of the world. He's like, Father, I'm not asking that you take them out of the trouble that's coming. Keep them in there while this is going on, but protect them while they're there. And so God releases something inside of us, and then when the pressure comes to begin to cause things that have been dormant to come to the surface, we have opportunities to manifest what it is that God placed inside of us. And someone once said, you figure out what's inside of someone when they get squeezed. You squeeze a Christian, Christ should come out. And when we get squeezed and something other than Christ comes out, we need to pay attention to what we've allowed to build us, to form us, to become our identity so that we can become what we were intended to become. God has this plan, and the plan has to do with the nature of Jesus Christ being released in a people. He's never changed his plan, and he doesn't adjust his plan because of new circumstances and new situations. He has the same plan, and the plan is that people that are disciples of Jesus Christ, that are living out the life that he's given us to live and putting it into action in our lives, then would begin to influence other people around us, and we would make disciples. That wherever we go, we're making disciples, and we're teaching those disciples to obey the things that Jesus commanded us. And the command that Jesus gave us is twofold. Love God, love your neighbor. This is the greatest commandment. He says it again in John 14, 15, 16, and 17. Such a great passage. If you've not spent time praying through and meditating through those chapters, I would highly suggest you doing that. He says that a new commandment I give you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. It says, if you love me, you will do what I command. And the command is to love one another. Greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. Now he's talking about what he's done, but his example is an example for us to follow, that we begin to lay down our lives for others, and that as we do that, we begin to release what's inside of us, and we teach others to do the same thing. And so the life of every believer, we're here to change the world that we live in. We are here to bring about influence, to bring about a shifting and a changing, but the way that we do that is not by looking at the enemy. It's not by being louder. It's not by bullying. It's not by trying to press people into our ideas and our agendas. It is by calling people through love into a relationship with God, where they begin to manifest that love. As they feel love, they then have the capacity to be loving, because we only love because he first loved us. And as we do that, we become a sign to the society that we're in. Another place in that same passage, John 14 through 17, he says that by your love, they will know you are my disciples. By the way that we love one another, by the way that we love God, by the way that we love the people around us, people will recognize that there's something different in us. And so when we come to him, when we put our trust in him, he begins to transform us from the inside out. He puts the Spirit of God within us, and the Spirit of God within us begins to naturally bear fruit in our lives. It begins to cause things to happen in our lives that we begin to show the fruit of our relationship with God. And that fruit, according to Galatians chapter 5, it looks like love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. This is the fruit that the Spirit of God releases in our lives, that we become more loving, that we find ourselves giving of ourselves to others. Now, that when we talk about love, I mean, we actually have to define what we're talking about, because this word love is thrown around, and it's been so divorced from meaning that most people, they say somebody's not being loving when the person doesn't make them feel all warm and fuzzy inside. And love is not primarily making someone feel warm and fuzzy inside. Love will sometimes do that. But love is a commitment to the other person's good, even above your own. Philippians chapter 2 puts it this way. It says, brothers, you should follow the exact same example that was in Christ Jesus. And right before then, he's explaining what that looks like. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Don't do anything because it's going to be for your good alone. Make sure that it's also others. And don't do it out of conceit. Don't do it because you think that you're right. Don't do it out of a pride in your position or a pride in your opinion. But consider others as more important than yourselves. If that one piece was understood in our world today, it would completely change the environment that we are in. Because what's happened is there are evil people with evil agendas that are being manipulated by evil powers in spiritual places. And we are in a battle for the direction that our societies, and I'm not just talking about America, I'm talking around the world, there is a battle. Now, I know not every single nation is facing it in the same way, but Western world, specifically Europe, Americas, and some places even in Australia, New Zealand, in some of the democratic places that are in Asia as well, are facing the same battle. There's an ideological battle where the enemy is playing his hand right now. And the way that we win is not by looking like the enemy. It's not by getting angrier. It's by becoming more loving. We want to be those that look like Jesus. We love. We consider others as better, as more important than ourselves. We do not look out only for our own interests, but also to the interests of others. We follow the royal law that James calls what we call the golden rule, that do unto others as you would have them do unto you. How would you want someone to treat you that has a different opinion than you? Is that how you treat others that have a different opinion than you? How would you want somebody to talk to you? Would you want to give them the level of honor that you're giving to the people that you despise the most? Because to the extent that you do it to the least of these, you've done it to him. Now that should put the fear of the Lord in us. The way that we treat the people around us that carry the image of God is how God receives our treatment of him. Are we holding on to hope? Are we persevering in our expectation that God is going to move? Are we pressing? Now, there's times where we actually have to cut off relationship with people. There are times where we stop listening to certain input because of what it does in our hearts. We have to learn how to steward ourselves so that we can be a gift to the world, because we're a gift to the world. We are God's gift to the world. I can remember when I was growing up being told again, you are not God's gift to the world. Actually, I am. And so are you. You are God's gift to the world. What kind of a gift are you? We get to bear the fruit of the Holy Spirit, peace. What would it look like if we began to bring peace into our conversation, when we began to bring peace into the way that we talk about those that have a different opinion, different ideology than us? How about joy? What would happen if we began to live out our lives in joy? If we began to manifest joy when we are out in public arenas? And I'm not talking about the one aspect of that when we manifest, say the drunkenness in the spirit, though that does happen, but just plain joy, having fun, laughing, enjoying life, that in the midst of difficulties, we can still enjoy the pleasures that God gives us. Even when we're in the middle of a battle, we can still take joy in friendship and a great meal, and how God has made us to enjoy life. The Westminster Catechism says the chief end of man is to know God and enjoy him forever. God created us for joy. How about patience? This, another translation calls it long suffering. Like the Message Bible says, it's a willingness to stick with things. This patience, this endurance that we hold on, that we don't change our mind because we get new information, that we make commitments and we stick with those commitments. This is related to faithfulness. That our faithfulness, that we are ones that people can trust in, that we become trustworthy because we say what we mean and we mean what we say. That our yes means yes and our no means no, and that we recognize, as Jesus said, that anything other than that is actually from the evil one. That constantly going from this direction to that direction is not a fruit of the Spirit. That this place of being ones that are led by the Spirit, being like the wind, doesn't mean that we're flighty and we can't make commitments. It means that it's not always obvious what it is that's moving us, but we're being moved as the Spirit would have us be moved. It's not just changing our minds very quickly and not being able to make commitments, but making commitments and holding on to them. Self-control. Well, I couldn't help myself. Well, actually, we can, because we have the Spirit of God within us. We can help ourselves. Kindness. Being kind to others. Being kind to the people that we meet. Being kind to those that are stuck in systems. Being kind to those that are stuck in deception and don't understand it. Crying out, Lord, that forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Even when it's hurting us, we still are kind towards other people. We're kind towards those that are not kind towards us. We bless those that curse us. We bless and do not curse. We're good to those that spitefully use us. And in this way, as we refuse to come under the influence of the Spirit that others are under, we actually release the spirit that we're under, and we give them the opportunity to be influenced by that Spirit. See, if we hold to the Spirit of God, it's not just so that they feel good about it. This is spiritual warfare. This is how we do spiritual warfare. That when someone's being mean and we stay kind in the midst of it, it actually shifts something. It shifts the equation. And as long as that demon that is riling them up does not get agreement from everybody that's involved, if we stay out of agreement with that demon and we stay in agreement with the Spirit of God, we actually begin to release solution instead of problem. Because there's a lot of problem that's going on, but we're the solution. We've been given the Spirit of God to bring the kingdom of God to bear, and we do that by how we interact with others and how we respond to the situations that we find ourselves in. We become the agents of change that God uses, and as we stay in love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, as we stay in this place, as we manifest this in the way that we interact on social media, in the way that we interact with people that are talking to us or yelling at us, or the way that we talk about people that have said something that is clearly wrong or that we disagree with or that our opinion doesn't have room for, we begin to do that. We actually release the leaven that God has given us into the world, and we begin to change those that we interact with. We provide an alternative. If we just get angry when someone's angry, we justify their anger. But if we stay in peace when someone else is angry and we don't respond in kind, we actually bring judgment on that anger and the source of the anger, and it gives them the opportunity to be free from it. Doesn't mean that they will take it, but they're given the opportunity because we're operating out of a different spirit. And that's what we've been given. We can operate out of a different spirit, and that warfare begins to shift the equation. And as we do that regularly, we begin to bring influence into people's lives. We begin to bring influence into the people around us, and it begins to change our community, and it begins to change culture. But it starts with us changing us. See, we've been given real authority to bring God's kingdom to earth. And bringing God's kingdom to earth, it has to do with the power gifts. That's absolutely true. It's bringing deliverance from evil spirits. If a demon manifests in my presence, I'm going to cast it out and somebody's going to get free. That's who I am. That's what we've been given. That's who you are. That's what you can do. If somebody's sick in my presence, I'm going to pray for them to be healed. I'm going to go after. If someone doesn't know Jesus, I want to share Jesus. But I'm doing that in the spirit of Jesus, and not just the capital S, but the little s, in the same way that Jesus did it. I want to do it in the same way that Jesus did it. I want to see people that are under the yoke of deception and bondage, and I want to be moved with compassion, not get angry at the people because they're following some agenda that I see the error of. It doesn't matter if I see the error of it or if I don't see the error of it. I don't change. I manifest Jesus, because that's the new creation. That's what it looks like to be a Christian, that we look like Jesus. And this is a battle. And if we do not fight this battle in our own hearts and keep our own hearts right, we'll lose the battle outside of us. Because to the extent that you manifest the kingdom inside of you, you can exert influence outside of you. But too many of us, we've been trying to change things outside of us, and in so doing, we've looked more like our enemy than we have our God, and we wonder why things aren't changing. We have to turn aside wrath with a gentle word. We have to turn aside the angst with peace. We have to change the dynamic of bullying by gentleness. That word gentleness, it's such a beautiful fruit of the Spirit. Strength under control. Gentleness is not weakness. Gentleness is strength, knowing that you could do something but you don't do it. It's holding back. It's not forcing your way. It's coming in a place of peace. And what we don't realize is how powerful this is. This is so powerful that this is actually the power of the cross, coming in an opposite spirit. It was Jesus's submission to injustice that broke the power of that injustice. It was his submission to death when he didn't deserve death that broke the power of death. If he would have fought for what was his own, he would have lost. He might have won that battle, but he'd have lost the war. But he didn't lose the war. He continually submitted himself to God, and like a sheep led to the slaughter, he opened not his mouth, Peter says, giving us an example. Giving us an example. This is our example. And we have to speak truth. When we recognize there's deception, we should be speaking truth. But how? It's not the what that's the most important. It's the how. The how is essential, because the what is like trying to clean the outside of the cup. The how is trying to clean the inside of the cup. If you clean the inside of the cup, the outside will be cleaned. But if you clean the outside of the cup and you polish that thing and you make it look good, but the inside of it is still poison, the people that drink of it are still going to die. It doesn't matter how pretty it looks. See, and so when I'm talking about the virtues of Christ and the fruit of the Spirit, what I'm talking about is our interior reality. That we can steward ourselves. And when we come into a situation and we don't feel like we are under control, we need to pull back from that situation and get with God until we are under control, and then we can re-engage. Just because something is trying to pick a fight does not mean that that's the fight that we take up. When God initiates the fight, we fight. But when the enemy is initiating a fight, sometimes we just ignore him. We don't have to give him attention. Just because he wants attention doesn't mean that we have to give it to him. And so we hold on in the midst of the fire. So, I'm looking at a couple of these comments. Wow. I you know I am so, what's the word I'm looking for? I am absolutely convinced of the necessity of this to be brought into the conversation. The problem is there's so much voice out there that's absolutely right, but it's absolutely wrong because of the way that it's being communicated, and it's not bringing influence. And I want to see the body of Christ change the conversation that's going on in the world right now. And the only way we're going to do that is by doing it this way. It's going to have to be the fruit of the Spirit that is shifting things. And too many times we think that because we are correct that we're right. And we have to separate the difference. Being factual is not being truthful, and being correct is not being right. And we may have information and we may not have information. But when it comes down to it, are we loving? Because that's the real key. And we can change the world around us. We need leaders that are willing to rise up and operate in a different spirit. We need politicians that are willing to stop trying to fight the same way the enemy does, but actually will just stand for truth. And I know when it first starts happening that a lot of those politicians that try that people aren't going to recognize the strength that's there, but they will over time if it is a lifestyle, if it's not a fad to get votes, but it actually is a lifestyle. God will honor his word. And if you are called to the political arena, and there's somebody that's called to the political arena that's going to hear this. If you are called to the political arena, you need to hold the course for the long run, because in the long run, faithfulness will be seen. Because Jesus says that wisdom is justified by her children. And we are too often moved by the immediate results. We take polls and we find out, oh, it's not working because it didn't have immediate results. And we may lose one battle but win the war. But too often we're so busy trying to win a battle that we forget about the war that we're facing. And we need politicians that are willing to take a long-term approach and actually live this out as a lifestyle and hold to it. And over time, it will bring influence, and that ability to come into that place of influence will be seen, because God will uphold his word. And what he's promised you is going to come true. And you don't have to give in to the world's values to win. You don't have to do it the way that the enemy does it. Just because it worked for someone does not mean that it was right. And so if you hold on to that, it will shift things. And there are those, I mean, this is for everybody. We need to hold on to the fruit of the Spirit in the midst of what's going on. But there's a couple leaders that are going to hear this, and you need to settle in your heart right now that you're in this for the long haul, that you're gonna actually make this change, and you're gonna hold on to it, and you're not going to change no matter what. And in the long run, it may not look immediately to have the results that you want, but in the long run, it will have the results that God intends, because he knows what he's doing. And he actually knows the human heart better than polls, better than sociologists, better than all the studies that are out there. God knows the hearts of man, and he knows what's going to work. And he is going to change the world by people that will actually look like Jesus and not change. Integrity is more important than popularity. We've got to get that. Integrity is more important than popularity. And you can give up integrity for popularity. Church leaders, you can give up integrity for popularity, but you will lose the backing of heaven. Will you stand when it's not easy? Because if you do, if you humble yourself, God will exalt you. If you exalt yourself, God will humble you. And those are two opposite jobs, and only one person gets it. So if you're going to choose to exalt yourself, God will then go to work at humbling you. If you choose to humble yourself, God will go to work at exalting you, and he's better at both jobs than you are. Which one do you want him to take? Take the other one. Personally, I would rather him exalt me. I want him to humble me. If I'm not doing a good enough job, believe me, I pray that he would humble me, that he would humiliate me, if that's what it takes for me to look like him. Whatever it takes for me to look like him. I want it. I will pay the price. I've seen what I can do when I don't look like him, and it disgusted me. I don't want to see that anymore. I want to see what he can do when he lives his life through me. And I think you do too. So we can change what's going on in the world around us. It may not be immediate, but like leaven, it's going to grow, and it's going to grow, and it's going to grow, and it's going to grow. And sooner or later, it'll overtake the whole lump. And it's time to come back to God's original plan. I mean, 2,000 years ago, he set it into place that people would look like Jesus. They would begin to live out his life, and they would begin to teach others how to do the same. And as they taught those around us, and they taught those around them, who then taught those around them, who then taught those around them, the multiplication effect would transform cities, nations, and the world. And it's worked so far. Throughout history, that's worked so far. And this idea of progress, that we're so much better than what they were back then, is insane. I've talked about that another time. I don't have time to go into that. But we've lost more than we've gained. And we need to come back to Jesus, because what he said 2,000 years ago is more true than what's being said today. And the principles that he gave us are absolute, and they work in every time, in every culture, in every season, if we want to see God's purposes fulfilled. Now, if we want to manipulate and we want to control, we can look just like the enemy. And we'll end up with the same end that the enemy will end up with. That's not a good end. We don't need that. We need people that will carry his nature and begin to influence those around us. And whether your influence is big or whether it's small, maybe it's just a couple friends. Maybe it's just your family. Maybe it's just a small group. Maybe it's a small church. Maybe it's a huge church. Maybe you're a YouTube influencer and you got 200,000 people that are watching everything that you do. It doesn't matter what level of influence that you have. It works the same. If you're faithful with what you have now, you'll be given more. If you actually look like Jesus with what you have, he will increase what you have. And we're called to influence the world to look like Jesus, to see how beautiful he is, because he is lovely and he is worthy of worship and he is worthy of devotion, and everything that we have should be laid at his feet because he is the only one worthy. And when he is lifted up, he will draw all men to himself. And we need people to come to Jesus. It's happening. There's so many amazing things happening around the world in the midst of all the noise. And man, bad news always gets big press. But there's a lot of good news that's going out there. There are people that are getting delivered. There are people that are getting free. There are people that are coming to the Lord in the thousands, in the tens of thousands. They're coming to Jesus around the world. The kingdom is advancing, and we get to be a part of it. It's an amazing, amazing time in the midst of the battle. See, one thing you learn about spiritual warfare is this. When the enemy starts to pick up and to intensify the battle, it's because he realizes that he's losing. He's like a scared, desperate animal. He's just lashing out with everything that he has, trying to win because he knows that he's losing. And if we just don't quit, we win. He's going to lose. And when God decides this thing is over, he's going to send one little angel that's going to wrap up Satan in a chain and throw him into a pit, and it's over. One little angel. Not even an archangel. Not even Michael and his armies. Just one little angel is going to bind up the devil and throw him into a pit, because when God says it's over, it's over. But he's waiting so that you and I can bring one more into the kingdom. One more lost soul finding their home in Jesus. One more lost person finding hope where they were hopeless. One more broken person finding wholeness because of his forgiveness and his redemption. And so he waits for one more. Will we go get him? That's what we're here for. That's what we've been given to do. So guys, wow. Well, I said I'm going to interpret some dreams. When Revelation just lands on me like that, I get so excited about it. I just want to rest in it for a while. But let's go ahead and start interpreting some dreams, because I know God is speaking to some of you, and there's some things that you want to understand about what he's saying. And my hope, my goal is that as we interpret dreams, that you're learning principles so that you can interpret your own dreams, because we're here to equip you to understand the voice of God. We're not here to tell you what God is saying. We're here to help you recognize what God is saying and respond to him yourself, because you can hear from God for yourself. If you know Jesus, you've been given the capacity to hear from him. And anybody can interpret a dream if they have the Spirit of God, if they're willing to surrender to what he's saying and to allow themselves to be moved on by his voice. And so we have so many resources to help you grow and help you understand dreams. And this is one of the tools to help you to understand. But I encourage you, especially if you have a lot of dreams, to press in and to ask the Lord to show you, because he'll show you what they mean. So Valerie Bowman, you said, I was fishing with a turtle as bait. John Paul Jackson said, this is important. And then I'm in a shed walking on boxes, ceiling level. An angel said to pick up a fishing pole. I chose one with many strings and colors. Okay, so fishing. Fishing oftentimes talks about evangelism. Jesus told Peter, no longer will you be a normal fisherman, but I'm going to make you a fisher of men. And so there's this understanding of evangelism and spreading the good news. But why a turtle? A turtle is interesting. But if you think about a turtle has a shell, and when it's threatened, it retreats into a shell. So it kind of, there's an introvert thing that's there. And Valerie, I think that you probably have been shown some pictures of evangelism that work really well for extroverts, but don't work so well for introverts. And God is speaking prophetically. John Paul Jackson saying this is important. So that's a prophetic message. God is speaking prophetically to you that introverts can also share, but in a different way. You have different bait that looks different than what other people use, but it is still there. And God is going to give you a creative way. So in the shed, it's a place where you find what you need. It's where you're going to find the equipment that you need. And the angel says to pick up a fishing pole. What's the equipment that you're going to use? And it's one with many strings and colors, a lot of different colors. That's beauty, it's creativity. So God's going to give you a creative way to reach out using how God has made you, and it's going to be effective. And this is important for you to understand. It does not have to look like it looks like for other people, because God's made you unique and you have your own bait to use to bring people into his kingdom. So that is exciting. That's exciting. Okay, well, here's a fun username. It's all about Jesus. It's all about Jesus said, I had a dream that I was supposed to write a French exam to graduate from high school. The French exam was happening on Monday, and on Friday I knew I had another exam for my university degree. All right, so tests often talk about some type of test. Kind of obvious, right? But the metaphor that's there. A lot of times when you have a dream about taking an exam or taking a test, it means that you're going to be going through a test. And why a French exam? Because it's about a different language. It's about seeing things in a different way, being able to communicate in a different way. And the test that you're facing right now at one level is about your ability to communicate. And once you've passed that, the French exam, there's going to be another one that's going to take you to a whole different level. So there's a quick graduation from the first exam, because this is a high school. To graduate from the high school, you're going to have to learn how to speak differently. But once you've done that, you're going to be going quickly into another test that's going to take you to the university level or a higher level of education. So the test that you're in, one is about communication and communicating to different culture or different people, or communicating in a different way. And that's what you need to be able to move on for the other things that God has already released in your life. All right. Let's see. VOL. It says, I'm in an area where there were multiple bridges and there were snakes, one after another, jumping into a hole high in the wall where hands would catch them. The snakes had huge heads. So snakes often are talking about deception. The original serpent was a liar, and so since then snakes will often represent lies, deception, and so this is what's going on. Now the multiple bridges is a lot of transition. So there's a lot of transition going on. And the snakes were jumping into a hole high in the wall. So they're not just staying on the ground. They're actually coming up into a place where it's a higher influence, higher viewpoint, much more obvious, and they're huge heads. So it's intellectual, it's about the mind. So the deception is really an intellectual deception. So you are recognizing that in a season of a lot of transition, there's a whole bunch of deception that's being released, and it's actually it's an intellectual. It's about information that is deceptive, and there's a place for it, and it's eye level. It's being seen by a lot of people. Now, a couple different things. It's not your wall, it's not your bridge, so it's not saying it's your snake. So this is you recognizing something in an environment. So this is, you're not specifically interacting. You're not catching the snake. You're not trying to avoid the snake. You're just seeing this happen. So this is what we call an observing dream, which means that it's a dream about someone or something else. So this is an environment that you're in, And it's a call to intercession. Whenever you have a dream about something or someone other than yourself, it's always God inviting you to pray about that situation. So you're being invited to pray about this because there's deception, and there's a place that's been made for it, and it's become very obvious. And that's the prayer. The prayer, I mean, if there's a snake, you probably want to see the snake go away. So praying that there would be no place where the snake would be able to hide, that the deception would be exposed, that it would be removed, that it would be defeated, asking God to intervene in the situation that is there. Now that sounds a lot like what's going on right now. So that's God showing you how to pray about the situation that's going on. Let's see, Dominique, out of a bright light, a woman told me I was almost done with college. My last thing was sports. And I said, I don't know anything about sports. So my question, my curiosity is whether you're actually in college. I get the feeling you're probably not, but because this seems like it's more about a metaphoric college. College, like a university, this is a higher level of training, a higher level of education, could be spiritual education. And for you to be able to graduate, for you to be able to go on to what God wants you to do with the things that you've learned, the last thing you need to understand is sports. Now, the thing about sports is most sports are team-oriented. Learning how to play with a team, learning how to stay disciplined. Paul says that those who compete in the games compete so as to win. He talks about the spiritual discipline that's needed, how bodily exercise is good for a little, but spiritual exercise is good for more. And so there's a disciplining, an exercising, a spiritual disciplining that's important. There's a what's the word I'm looking for? I'm thinking of another principle that Paul talked about in I buffet my body, bringing it into submission, bringing the flesh into submission so that I can accomplish what God has wanted. I run the race so that I can win. So take a look at some of those scriptures from Paul, because this is all about sports. So team orientation, spiritual discipline, and making the hard choices to do what's needed to win, and not just whatever is comfortable that they would hinder that ability. If you are in sports, you make certain decisions about what you're going to eat, what you're going to do, what you're not going to do, your sleep schedule, etc. And everything is based around your performance. And so this is not an earning thing. This is a stewardship thing, that God has given us something that we get to steward, and how we steward it is key. That's the sports, and that's the last lesson that you need to learn, because you have a lot of information about the higher things of the Spirit, but this is what you need to be able to graduate and begin to put it into practice in a more obvious, that's obvious is not the right way, but to put it into more practice and to accomplish the career or the destiny that God has planned for you. So that is a great dream. What an encouragement. Susan Croker, Croker, I'm not sure exactly the right pronunciation, but I'm on an eagle, wings everywhere. It's angels on the ground. It's American eagle with cigar in its mouth. I hold the cigar, and out of the eagle's mouth, crows come. It gets its cigar back and flies off. So you're on an eagle, and there's angels' wings everywhere, but you're on the ground, and there's in front of you an American eagle with a cigar in the mouth. So you pull the cigar out of its mouth, and a crow comes out of the mouth, and then it takes the cigar back, and it flies off. So this is, again, an intercession dream. This American eagle is talking about the nation of America. Cigar, tobacco often represents a substitute spirit, because the smoke of incense and the smoke that comes into the temple, the cloud often talks about Holy Spirit. And so smoking is often about some type of substitute spiritual, false spiritual experience. And so there's a false spirituality that's been accepted, and there's actually a spirit of death that's been released out of the mouth of America because of the false spirituality that's been accepted. And so you're seeing this again for intercession. This is for intercession, that the Lord would remove the false and replace it with the true, and that he would stop the spirit of death from having entrance into America through the mouth of its leadership, that would end, so that there could be peace. So a couple different dreams that are about what's going on in the world, and specifically in America right now. It's interesting. And God is calling people to pray. We are in a season where prayer is so important, and being able to pray, and again, praying in the fruit of the Spirit, not out of fear, not out of anger, not out of manipulation, but praying so that we are connected and our heart is connected with Him, that we're experiencing the union that He purchased with His blood, so that we could be made one with Him by His Spirit and come to the Father in love. And as we anchor ourselves in that place and in union with Him, we can actually issue out the prayers out of our mouths that align with His heart. And it's the Spirit making intercession through us, so that in the midst of every situation, the good that God has planned would come forth. It would actually come to pass in the environment that we've been in. And this is the season that we need watchmen on the wall. We need watchmen on the wall, watchmen that don't yell and try to scream at the enemy, but watchmen that will give warning at the appropriate time to the right people, so that people can make choices. It's fun. Later today, I'm going to be doing a Facebook Live with a couple other prophetic voices. A friend of mine, Elizabeth T.M. Fook, Jamie Galloway is going to be on it. Doug Addison is going to be on it. A couple other people are going to be joining us. And we're going to be talking about just responding to the times that we're in. I feel like I've got something to share just for the prophetic and for the prophetic movement, and the importance of some things that I'm seeing right now and how to respond to that. So you might want to be on that if you have an opportunity. If you just look up, we'll be sharing it on my page and on Streams Ministries Facebook page. So if you're not on Facebook, that might be a good thing to do. But encourage you, just join in, listen to that. It'll be left up there live, so you'll be able to have that link and you'll be able to see it. But you're going to want to see that, because I think there's going to be some good stuff shared, and I think that what I share will be helpful for many of you. So guys, I know that we've got quite a bit more dreams. I'm going to do one more here in just a second. But before I do that, I want to encourage you, if you have not already, click that subscribe button down at the bottom of your video. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, and then make sure to let YouTube know that you want notifications from streams. That way, whenever we go live, you will see it when we go live, and you'll be able to join in right away, hear what it is that we share. Sometimes we just do dream interpretation, sometimes we just do teaching, but most of the time we like to do both. I'm heading off to Goshen, Indiana this weekend. I'm going to be teaching on the Tabernacle of Moses. If you're anywhere near Goshen, Indiana, check it out. Look up The Movement. That's the name of the church, The Movement in Goshen, Indiana. It'll have all the information there. It's also on our calendar on streamsministries.com. Would love to have you join us. And if you are interested in learning about dream interpretation, I really encourage you to join us for our Streams Academy Prophetic and Revelatory Training. We're starting Module 5 next weekend. So I'll be here teaching that. We're going to do Module 5, and we're going to teach on how to interpret dreams and visions. We're going to go through the whole process of dream interpretation over a day and a half. We're going to work through the principles. We're going to give you all the tools. And then 3 weeks later in October, we're going to come back and we're going to be me and my friend Lisa Matschek, who was one of the people that helped train me in dream interpretation. So she really knows her stuff, and she's an amazing mentor when it comes to this. We're going to work together to bring some mentoring. We're going to go through dream interpretation. We're going to teach you how to do dream interpretation on teams for outreach as well as for friends, what that looks like. We're going to interpret dreams. We're going to give feedback on that interpretation. And it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of time to spend in that. And you can do that live, or you can do it on a Zoom call. So if you register, you have the choice of coming here physically and joining us here in Louisville, or if you're not able to do that, you can join in. We'll send out a link and you'll be able to join in all the sessions through Zoom. But quick, most important on that, if you decide you're going to do it virtually, realize, make sure you check out what the time zone is, because it's live only. There is no archive for you to come back to and watch later. So if you decide to register, that means you're going to be watching it live. Okay, so let's grab another dream. Donna Reynolds. So let's see. I see this one. Says, the little dog kept trying to follow. I was relieved that it wasn't coming after me. At the end of dream, another bear was messing. You know, it looks like this might be multiple comments to share a dream, and without the rest of the context, that's going to be difficult. So I'm just going to stick with a dream that's only one comment. So I'll do this one. Verishua Maddox. I hope I didn't completely slaughter your name. If I did, I apologize. Verishua, you said, I was walking on a tightrope in a rocky area. My cousin was further on the rope. At the time, she was on a gap year in Australia. I was wearing red and green Indian clothing. We had no balance issues. So you're walking in a tightrope. There's rocks all around. You can see your cousin ahead of you, and you're wearing this red and green Indian clothing. So you've got a path that you've got to take, that you have to have care. Like the tightrope, there's only you don't have a lot of room to step off to the right or step off to the left. You've got to stay on the path that you're on, and it's important because there's influence for you to make. Now, your cousin being on the same rope in front of you, that there's a calling on your cousin's life as well, and the influence that they've had, and some of the choices that they've made. Obviously, not all of the choices, but some of the choices that they made might be an example for you to follow. But what you're called to do is a little bit different, because you're called to influence different cultures. Maybe their influence is going to be in one arena, but your influence is in another arena. So the Indian culture, is that actually going to India, or is it just representing another culture that's different than yours? And actually, Verishua, it's possible that actually is your culture. I'm not 100% sure. So is it a different culture? Or if you're actually from India, then that would be about influencing your own culture, and that would be the difference from what your cousin is doing. So there's a reason why you were in the Indian clothing and you just saw them there and what they were doing. So there's some similarities between the call, but the call that you're on is you've got to be careful to go in the right direction. Step carefully in the season that you're in, because there is potential of the rocky area. So there's danger that's there. And so just be careful to walk straight. And if you're on the call that God has given you, as long as you follow his voice, you will walk straight. That's the whole thing of following God's voice. He will give you exactly what you need, and you will be able to walk it out. So wonderful. Guys, thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next week. Have an amazing day. Bless you.